All right, so imagine this. You're finally on that trip you've been dreaming of, right? And you're ready to handle everything in English. Ordering a coffee, swapping stories with locals, all that good stuff.
And we're talking about going way beyond just textbook phrases here.
Exactly. So we're diving deep into, well, my draft script for the Trivial episode of Lemon Listen, and obviously my notes too.
It's all about helping you feel totally comfortable, totally confident, having those travel conversations in English.
I love that we're kind of analyzing my own work here. It's pretty meta. But seriously, seeing those Lemon Listen excerpts right next to my notes just highlights how much goes into creating even a simple conversation about travel.
It's amazing how you used such a specific scene, that slightly crazy airport setting,
Yeah.
to bring in that really basic but super important question. Where are you headed? Simple as that.
Mhm.
Lenny asked Lucy, and she says, I'm going to Paris next week. But it's subtle, how it just gets you ready for a travel chat just by being in an airport.
That's a really good point. It's funny, I didn't even realize I was doing that on purpose. But it makes total sense. And that actually reminds me, in my notes, I have a whole section about practicing questions about travel, the important ones.
Corey.
But Lemon Listen takes it up a notch, immediately breaking down each phrase. Like after Lucy says, I'll be there for a week.
Yes.
They analyze how short and sweet it is.
Exactly. It gets to the point. And that's how we learn. We hear it in context, break it down right away. It just clicks.
Right.
And maybe someone just starting out, they stick with that phrase.
Yeah.
But someone more advanced could say, I'm planning on spending a week exploring those charming villages.
Ooh, I like that.
A little more,
It's true. It's true. And that reminds me of how much emphasis I put on those small phrases that just make it sound natural. Instead of just saying, I want to see museums, it's more like, oh, I'm looking forward to experiencing the local culture.
Yes. And you're not just giving vocabulary there. You're showing them how to sound like a fluent speaker, not just someone who's memorized a bunch of phrases.
Yeah, absolutely.
But speaking of going beyond the basics, those example dialogues you have in your notes, those are amazing, like that coffee shop scene.
Yeah.
Lenny just casually says, hey, I heard you're planning a trip. So relatable.
It's amazing how often we have that exact conversation.
All the time.
But in that example, I made sure to include key vocab, itinerary, accommodation, without it sounding forced.
Exactly that, yeah. It's that balance. Giving them the practical stuff,
Yeah.
but also showing them how to use it naturally. And it doesn't stop there. You've got those open-ended questions, too.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations for things to do? It just opens up the conversation, leads to something interesting. Like you're encouraging them to be open to those unexpected turns, like when you're traveling.
I love that comparison. That is spot on. But it's not just about the questions themselves. It's how you ask them too, right?
Yeah.
So instead of just, oh, you're going there, it's more like, I heard you're going to destination. What are you most excited about? It just invites a more interesting answer.
Of course. The tone is key. It shows you're really interested, which makes people want to open up more. And in your notes, you even have alternatives. Instead of going to all the time, it's headed to, which just sounds more natural.
I'm so glad you noticed that. It's those little things that can really make a difference, like adding spices to a dish,
Completely agree. Making the language your own, not just textbook stuff.
Exactly. Speaking of which, you've thought of everything from the airport to the coffee shop. You even have catching up with colleagues at work. And you even cover how to talk about your itinerary, which I know can sometimes be a little tricky.
It's true. You want to give them the details without, overwhelming them with a play-by-play of every minute. And you did it perfectly. Phrases like, on the first day, I plan to explore the city center, and then it sets the scene. But you're not stuck on the little things.
It's like a little teaser trailer for your trip. And in my examples, I sprinkled in some logistical stuff that people always want to talk about.
Right. Like instead of, I'm staying somewhere near the Sagrada Familia, Lenny says, I'll be staying at a charming boutique hotel, just a stone's throw from the Sagrada Familia. It tells you where, but it also hints at his style,
Totally. Choosing a local place, more personal experience, all that.
Exactly. Those details make it come alive.
And speaking of details, I didn't forget about getting around. How you travel is a huge part of the experience.
Oh, for sure. You've got lines like, I'll be renting a car to explore the coast, which just makes you picture those drives, those beaches.
Oh, yeah.
And then for the city person, there's, I'm planning on using public transport, which, let me tell you, that's its own adventure sometimes.
Nothing like figuring out the metro in a new place, right? Makes you feel like you're really there.
Absolutely. And you never know who you'll meet doing that. Which, by the way, that section you have on talking about the trip afterward, genius.
Oh, thanks.
People get stuck saying, it was fun.
Right.
But you actually give them ways to describe the trip.
Because nobody wants to hear a boring travelogue, right? I want people to really paint a picture. So I've got the highlight was definitely, or I was blown away by.
Using those strong images, sensory details, it's like you're bringing them along with you.
That's it. And of course, I had to include a whole thing about recommendations. What's the point of amazing experiences if you don't share them and get people excited about new places?
And it goes both ways. You even gave awesome examples of asking for recommendations. If you're ever in Buenos Aires, you have to try. Like, how could you say no to that?
Right. It's all about that energy, making people feel like they don't want to miss out. So we've talked about starting the conversation, sharing our plans, even the post-trip chats. But there's this one thing in Lemon Listen that we have to mention.
You mean that part where they actually practice saying the phrases out loud?
Exactly. Because it's one thing to hear it, but to say it, even if it's just to yourself, it makes a difference.
Huge difference. Your brain remembers it better, and then it rolls off the tongue easier when you need it.
Practice makes perfect, or at least it gets us closer. And you even took it further in your notes, that section where they fill in the blanks with their own trip details. So smart.
It's like their own little travel phrase book just for them.
Wow.
Way more fun than a textbook.
Exactly. And it plays into that excitement of planning a trip. But, one of my favorite things is how you used humor in Lemon Listen.
Oh, yeah.
It makes it fun, but it also helps people remember. When something's funny, it sticks with you.
Sneaking in a little learning while you laugh. I love it.
Me too. Honestly, going through this with you, I'm realizing how much thought went into Lemon Listen. When it's your own stuff, it's easy to miss those little details.
Totally get it. But that's what's so great about these deep dives. You get to step back, really appreciate those subtle things that make it work.
So true. But enough about me, I'm curious. When it comes to you, how does your travel style come through when you teach English for travelers?
Wow, that's a good question. I've never actually thought about it like that. I guess, I'm all about like exploring on the fly, right? So I try to encourage that. Like those phrases are your starting point, but then you got to be ready to improvise, adapt to whatever happens. It's like giving them the confidence to go off the beaten track, but with language.
It's less about a strict plan and more about those unexpected moments, those conversations that make travel and language learning so awesome, right?
Exactly. Finding those hidden gems, not just the same old tourist phrases. Embrace getting a little lost, making mistakes even. That's where the good stuff happens.
I love that. And, it reminds me of something we were talking about earlier, how Lemon Listen breaks down those phrases right when you hear them in a conversation. It's like, here's the map, here's the compass, but don't be afraid to explore a little.
Totally. Because it's not just memorizing words, right? It's about feeling confident, being able to handle anything. Asking for directions, ordering food, or even just chatting with a local artist or something.
It's about connecting with people for real, not just, hi, how are you, tourist stuff, but really getting into the culture.
Exactly. And that's what's so cool about Lemon Listen. It gives you the tools, but it also lets you find your own way, your own voice.
So true. Well, I think we've covered just about every aspect of travel talk today.
We've been everywhere.
We have. We talked about those simple but powerful phrases, practicing, making it personal, and not being afraid to be spontaneous, both with travel and with speaking.
We even got into a little bit of the psychology behind learning a language, breaking things down, repeating, using humor, keeping it real.
And how our own travel styles influence the way we teach English.
It's been quite a trip.
It really has. To everyone listening, we hope you're feeling inspired to pack your bags, practice your English, and head out on your next adventure. And remember, you've got all the tools you need to handle those exciting conversations waiting for you out there.
Safe travels and happy exploring, everyone.